at the outset, I'd like to thank the Intersociety group led by Harindra Lal for giving me this opportunity to speak to you. So I hope you can see the opening slide. And I note that we have exactly 100 people to start with, which is really good. And as far as the questions that you may have through the presentation, please type it into the chat. And after the presentation is over, maybe about 35 minutes or so, we will switch to the question answer mode. And the moderator will read out the questions and I'll try to answer. And as I start, I'd like to have a disclaimer. Cybersecurity is very serious business. It involves, as we'll see shortly, several small and very large entities. And it's a huge topic also because there is a rapid evolution of things in this domain, and nobody can cover the entirety of it. So whatever I'm going to speak today is essentially reductionist. I have had to cut corners. So do not expect it to be exhaustive. There are enough resources available online if you are interested in any part of this. So can we go to the next slide, please? So I'll be talking about some introduction, and then wherein I'll define what we mean by cybersecurity as opposed to information security. And then we'll go on to some notable incidents and some definitions, especially on what are these threat landscape, what does it look like, what are threat actors, and what are these incidents and so on. And also what are the threat vectors. We will then look at the impact of COVID-19, work from home, work from anywhere, etc., and what it has done in terms of the new attack surfaces and the volume of attacks, etc. We will also talk about Zoom a little bit because I've been having a lot of queries because apparently the government of India has put out a notice that Zoom should not be used. So I will give you my opinion on it. Please do not take it for granted. Please consult other sources of information as well. And the need for cyber hygiene as we go forward. Next, please. Next, okay, this one. So here, we are aware that the internet is a kind of very important resource now. Every day, even before the present crisis, we were using it in every aspect of our lives. But during the COVID-19 crisis, it has become the lifeline for many of us. Like, for example, my company, we work from home or wherever we are. The office is no longer the most important thing, although much of our computer hardware is there. But for many of us, it is indeed the lifeline and the most important communications medium. If somebody were to ask a question, what's the most important medium today? Is it the newspaper, the print media, the TV, or the internet? I think most of us will say the internet because it combines the capabilities of all the other media. So it is actually sad for many of us to see that the internet is being abused through a growing number of security concerns. Now, the fact that internet is borderless and permissionless makes this whole jurisdiction very difficult. Our country, India, for example, I am aware that there are other people who are outside India, from outside India as well. Any country has a geographical jurisdiction, but we do not have jurisdiction on the internet itself, which makes it very hard, or much harder than in real life, to protect citizens. Now, perhaps there is a learning from all this. Once the COVID crisis is past, there could be policy measures that our respective countries and other international organizations in internet governance could put in place to protect end users and organizations. Next. Now, what is cybersecurity? The title of my talk is Cybersecurity, Emerging Cybersecurity Challenges. Now, this is but a small part of what is broadly called as information security, which covers a wide spectrum of security threats to things like SCADA, which is industrial computing, military, IoT, medical devices, physical or perimeter security, and network security. So for this session, we will define the term cybersecurity as something that threatens the end users who are using general purpose computers, which means PCs, laptops, mobiles, etc. And therefore, this presentation is directed at general purpose users. And as I said earlier, we'll also look at the controversies around Zoom. Next. Some terminology. Cybersecurity incident refers to any significant attack, data breach, infrastructure damage, loss of funds, injury or loss of lives through the internet and the computer networks. A threat actor is someone who could be an individual or a group or an organization who originate some of these cybersecurity incidents. A threat vector, we will see more examples as we go down. A threat vector is the actual means adopted by threat actors to remotely deliver attacks. As we'll see, the most common threat vector is email. It was before the COVID. During the COVID, it is still the most important threat vector. And then attack surfaces. Now, this issue of the 1,000 doors. The analogy is actually, if you have a fort and it has one door, you can protect that door with all your resources. But what if it has got 1,000 doors? And that is the state of software today. If you have a computer running an operating system plus a bunch of software, each of those things will have multiple doors. And it is very hard to protect. And each of those doors is an attack surface. It's very hard for us to protect all these 1,000 doors. In an actual computer, it is actually more than 1,000. Maybe you should retitle this as 10,000 doors. So practically, we depend on the operating system and in some cases, antivirus, etc., to protect us. But this is far from being perfect. And this is what really enables this kind of cyber threats to actually happen. Next. So now we move on to notable incidents, actors, and vectors. Now here, like I said, I have to condense a large set of or a large bunch of information. And what I have done is I have chosen to make word clouds out of these. Word cloud, as you can see, can we go to the next slide, please? This is the word cloud. For this actually bunches up several terms that are used widely. For example, eternal blue is a very important vulnerability. And there is a history to it, or the shadow brokers, who are a bunch of very, as the name indicates, shadowy people. We don't know who they are, but they have actually radically transformed the kind of landscape of security by revealing many vulnerabilities. Then, or NotPetya, as you can see at the bottom right, somewhere here, yeah. And then 0 day. So I'll quickly go through some of these things. On the right-hand side, you have a term called Ninja USB. What is this? Now, this looks like an ordinary USB charging cable. It just looks like a regular cable. But the USB interface on a regular machine, a computer, is actually peculiar because it can support multiple devices. We connect all kinds of things using a USB. You can connect a printer, you can connect a keyboard or a mouse, or a musical instrument. So it can support a bunch of things. Now this cable, Ninja USB, looks like a regular USB cable, charging cable that you can plug into a power adapter on one side and into your laptop or your mobile phone or whatever. If you're charging your mobile phone from your laptop, you will plug in one end to the mobile phone, other end to the USB of your laptop. Now, when you plug in this device into the USB of your laptop, something interesting happens. The computer first senses that it is a power device. And immediately thereafter, the computer senses that this is a keyboard. Although there is no keyboard, this is just a cable. And what's happening here is that the device is actually, it has electronics in this very simple looking cable to emulate a keyboard. And from the keyboard, pipe in commands into the computer. Now, this particular device is platform specific, and this is made for Windows. And what it does is, it almost as if there is a user at the other end of a keyboard typing in commands. This thing, as soon as you plug it in, sends a bunch of commands into the computer. saying that bring down your antivirus, download this software from somewhere, install it, and without your knowledge, just by plugging the cable into your USB on your laptop, within a few minutes, you have successfully downloaded a whole bunch of malware into your computer. So that is Ninja USB. If you look at Mirai just above that, Mirai is a very well-known attack from IoT devices, cameras to be specific, that had built-in a password login from the manufacturer, and there was no way to change it. And therefore, this was in IoT. What is interesting is that if you break, because IoT devices are clones of each other, you break into one IoT device, you can break into 100,000 IoT devices because they are clones of each other. So Mirai was a well-known case. Just above that is Pegasus. Now, Pegasus is a tool brought out by a very shadowy company from Israel that allows you to breach your iPhone. Now, there is a tool, similar tool for Android also. Then you have on top of that, can we please mute the person who is speaking? Thanks. Nope, nope. Right. So then you see that something called APTs. Now, APTs, as you'll see in the next slide, is one of the most important developments in the last decade in cybersecurity. APTs stand for advanced ED, advanced persistent threats. Now, these are the most dangerous of all the threat actors, and we will shortly see what they are in one of the next slides. Eternal Blue and a bunch of other tools like Eternal Romance and several others more were actually released onto the internet. These are all exploits or vulnerabilities. Many of them at the time of release were zero-day vulnerabilities. Now, what is a zero-day vulnerability? It is a vulnerability for which the original manufacturer has not written a patch yet. It has been just discovered, and there has been no time to write a patch. So it is actually open and exploitable by anybody. So this group called shadow brokers, we still do not know who they are. They, in 2016 and 17, came out to the public and said that here are a bunch of exploits. We have many more. You pay us some money in Bitcoin, and we will give it to you. And if you study the whole evolution of shadow brokers over a 2-year period, you will see that they have released some of the most virulent exploits. Now, interesting part of this exploit is that they were discovered not by shadow brokers themselves, meaning shadow brokers were a leak from something else called the Equations Group, which is right on the top. Now, Equations Group is a part of NSA, the government of US. They seem to have developed a bunch of zero-day exploits for themselves, but the shadow brokers somehow leaked that information. So it's a very, very, very high-level, almost geopolitical kind of incident, that whatever was developed in top secret by the US Equations Group, NSA, was leaked by these people over multiple installments. But the important part is not that they were just leaked, but there were a bunch of malware that started using this. One was called Petya, which you find on the left side of the. So Petya was a ransomware. Petya was actually quite dangerous, but what followed Petya, what is called as not Petya, was actually many, many times more dangerous. I don't have time to get into this, but it started attack by targeting a company in Ukraine, which sold a software just like Tally in India, which allowed the people, the businesses in Ukraine to pay their taxes. So this group somehow infiltrated this particular company and put their malware onto the periodic updates that, like, suppose you have Tally here in India, and automatically every month Tally gives you an update of Tally. So you automatically download it and you install it and you trust it fully. So they use this system to infiltrate a large number of computers in Ukraine, and instantaneously, can we go to the next slide? The people found this screen, that it says that your files are all encrypted. This is typical behavior of ransomware. And then it says send us $300 worth of Bitcoin. Now, this actually was the case also with Petya, that you send them money and you could get a key back. But in NotPetya, the objective of this particular malware was to destroy data, destroy hard disks. And even if you paid this $300, you could not get your data back. So the other part of this NotPetya was that it was highly virulent, something like COVID, that you put it on, once it attacks or once it comes onto one computer in the network, it attacks all of the computers in the network. And when I say computers, I mean Windows. I don't use Windows for precisely the same reason, that Windows seems to be, especially unpatched Windows, susceptible to many kinds of malware. And in the case of NotPetya, it was very illustrative that it destroyed entire organizations in the Ukraine. There was this very interesting case of Maersk, which is a Danish company, Denmark-based company. They're a giant company which ships all kinds of containers across by big container ships. Now, Maersk had exactly one office in Ukraine with one computer. Now, unfortunately, they were using this software to submit their taxes. So they got infected in this one computer, and it spread to all computers in the Maersk network in Denmark, all around the world. And you had this, hundreds of thousands of trucks coming to unload materials onto the ships and getting stuck because the entire system was knocked down. So NotPetya was actually a very interesting thing from multiple points of view. I would strongly advise that you take a look to see what is the extent of damage in a cyber war. This is exactly cyber war. Can you go to the previous slide, please? And this was a handiwork of something called Sandworm. You can see on the bottom left, Sandworm. Sandworm is technically, because none of these things can be confirmed, the handiwork of a Russian group. In fact, it's not even a group, it is the Russian military itself. And if you remember, there was this ongoing kind of physical war between Ukraine and Russia. And this is part of the whole, cyber war is now a part of the regular war. Now, there are many more things like this inside this word cloud. I am not going to get into it because we don't have time. So we will continue, and if you're interested, you may want to look up some of these things. For example, bank haste. Now, $1 billion there were a series of instructions on the SWIFT network to transfer $1 billion from a Bangladesh bank. Fortunately for the bank, this entire set of messages were spoofed as originating from some of the valid employees in that network. Fortunately for Bangladesh, they could only manage to send out 2 of those instructions, which was for a much smaller sum, and one was to Philippines and one to Sri Lanka, I think. And the Sri Lanka money was completely recovered. The Philippines money was not recovered. And fortunately, because of an error in the instruction, the rest of the instructions did not go through. So this is a very real case with some loss of money. In the worst case, it would, the Bangladesh bank would have lost $1 billion. So we're not talking about trivial sums of money here. So you may be keen to know who would be wanting to even try to steal this kind of large volumes of money, because in the bank network, these are eventually traceable. The answer to that is there are still places on earth, there are still countries where this traceability does not work. And primarily, I am told, again, none of this can be confirmed, this has to do with North Korea. So the kind of actors we're talking about is no longer very simple entities or organizations. These are global geopolitical things. So next slide, please. Next one. So who are we talking about? Earlier on, when I started programming on the PC, one of the things I did in 1988 was to write a virus. It is a COM file virus on MS-DOS. And that was basically me and my friend Amar, who's I think on the call. And it was basically for us to learn the fundamentals of the operating system itself, because writing a virus was very involved. You had to write an assembler only at that point in time. and it would give you a very interesting picture of the innards or the under the hood parts of the operating system. But today, that is not the situation. If you look at this pyramid, it starts with what is called as script kiddies or non-malicious actors, people like us who are either trying to study and understand the operating system, or people who are, in quotes, ethical hackers. I don't much like the term, but there are a bunch of people in the world who call themselves that, and they are not malicious. They want to check, how secure or whether some of these companies' systems are secure. So they are not there for money. They, at best, what they do is if they break in, then they inform the company and say, okay, look, we have broken into your computer. Then we had petty criminals and disgruntled workers, people, ex-employees, etc., who wanted to kind of do some damage to the company. Then we have criminals who are out to make money, but they're still small groups or individuals, and hacktivists who have an ideological problem. Then you had criminal groups, large groups of criminals who transact all kinds of passwords and credit card numbers on the internet, and cyber mercenaries. These are people that you pay if you want them to bring down somebody's computer. Then you have state-supported groups. Basically, this is for what is called as plausible deniability. So they are not state actors directly, but they are state-supported. They are paid for by the state. And finally, we have the APTs, the Advanced Persistent Threats. What are these APTs? These are actually departments of the cyber command of nations. They are advanced because the tools that they have, the zero-day vulnerabilities and what they accumulate by intense study of various environments, operating systems, platforms. So they do very systematic work. They are persistent. Now, normally, if you take a criminal group, they will try to break into something. If they don't succeed, after a while, they'll give up and they'll go away. But these people are persistent. APTs are persistent. That means they have enough funding, they have enough people to continuously work, even if there is no direct immediate benefit. And they're threats because they're deadly. They have many times over, they have proved in different parts of the world, from attacking Saudi Arabian oil refineries to what we saw as NotPetya, that is directly attacking a whole nation. So this can be quite deadly. And almost all of these are currently in existence and currently in the wild, which means they're all kind of active today. Next. What is the motivation for each of these people? So you can see some people like thrill seekers, they want satisfaction. Terrorist groups, they have ideology. Hacktivists also have ideology. Cyber criminals want profits. And nation states have geopolitical agendas, which, of course, we have seen in the case of some of the major disruptions that we've seen. Next. So this is what we just saw was a kind of summary of the many number of things that have been going on in the cybersecurity place, the marketplace. Now we'll quickly look at threat vectors. These are actually things that is our fault as end users, that we leave it open or we use it carelessly, and that causes malware to come into our machines. Next. Now the biggest, what jumps out of this page is email. Now, email, you must have heard of phishing and spear phishing. Phishing is a broad spectrum, what is called as spray and pray. Spray means send emails to hundreds of thousands of people, and pray means you pray that some of them will be foolish enough to click on the attachment and get themselves infected. So email is still the #1 vulnerability, and we have to educate ourselves to be very careful. Now, although it's easy to say, many of us by instinct, if an email comes from one of our friends, we may click on the attachment. But we are not sure if it comes from our friend, even though it says my friend's name in the from address. Now that is called a spear phishing, which is a much more targeted phishing, which is done after a great deal of work. They study you for several months. They find out who are your friends or your bosses or your subordinates. And then your mail will use one of them, and in the style that the person usually writes, and then you are kind of you're taken to. I mean, it's a kind of disguise. So you fall for it, and you click on the attachment. In all these cases, this is used as an attachment or a delivery system for malware, and the attachment is the first point of entrance. There are other things here, skimming. Now, skimming can be either on a POS terminal, that's a point of sale terminal in a supermarket, or it can be on an ATM by a camera or a keystroke logger which is mounted on the ATM device. So obviously, you can imagine what is the consequence of network services. Now we have Windows especially has a number of services which are exposed to the internet, RDS and many other services, and in some cases databases are also exposed to the internet. Now these are all vectors that so there are ways of attacking using these things. So we have web applications, we have encryption which has gone bad. In the case of Zoom, we will see that Zoom had made a claim that they are encrypted, but later on it turned out when you study them that some parts of their offering is not encrypted. Video, for example, is not encrypted because it takes too much of time, bandwidth, etc., to encrypt on the fly. So their claim was only partial. DDoS, drive-by, or supply chain. What is supply chain? A supply chain is when you procure a software from a vendor that you trust, but that vendor has got infected from some other source. And just like the case of NotPetya, you trust Tally, as an example, but you can't see who's supplying software to Tally. So that is one of the vulnerabilities that can be misused. A large number of smartphone-based exploits exist, including Jeff Bezos' iPhone got hacked a few months back. Then cloud-based keystroke loggers, VPNs, which are now in attention because of the work from home, and many people are using VPNs. SMS, because SMS, you get this SMS with an embedded link saying that click here, and that could be a potential entry point for malware. Let's move ahead. Next slide, please. So in summary, there are a large number of entities that specialize in different forms of cyber attacks, basically directed at end users, or in some cases, like spear phishing, at specific users. And now specific users requires a lot of homework. These entities vary widely in terms of the sophistication, persistence, funding, and targets. Now, when you look at most companies, these companies have perimeter defenses. That means the company has firewalls and all kinds of protections that takes care of protection provides protection to whoever is working in the company. What happens if you work from home? That's what we will see as one of the fallouts of COVID, that so far workers inside the companies were protected. Now, when you go out of the company to a home and start using these machines which are lying around, you might have problems. Now, end users, in any case, when you're outside the office and we are at home, we are to protect ourselves. And the major change in work from home is that the IT workforce, who are so far behind these protected perimeters, when they go home and start working from there, they may not have such protections. In some cases, they do, because they bring the computers from their office, and these computers already have latest patches and antivirus on it, so they are relatively safe, if that is the approach. But in some cases, people are asked to work from their own computers at home, in which case we have problems. Next. So the same point, the employees had home computers, but these were largely used for entertainment, personal productivity, or for the children to play, etc. And suddenly these are being used for official purposes. And remember the case of Musk. If one computer is compromised, it can compromise a whole network. So, so there is this danger when you look at it from a cyber security point of view. Now, the large number of people who are working from home, plus the large number of hours each person is putting from home, offers a broad target for malicious entities. Next. So what are the post-COVID developments in cyberspace? So a lot of threat actors masquerading as World Health Organization, UN, etc. Phishing messages claim to be coming from COVID-19 sources. Malicious apps that claim to track diseases. In fact, there was an Android app that claimed that the app will track the disease, but it actually locks up your machine and says, "Give me money if you want to get your phone back." So that is ransomware, actually. So malware distribution around the coronavirus, emails or websites with domain names. There are some 5,000 domain names. I was looking at it yesterday. 5,000 domain names booked in the last 2 months, all with Corona name somewhere. And the idea is that you want to lure end users to believe that they are something official. Excuse me. Social engineering attempts, including advisories, SMS with an embedded COVID themes, URL links, various kinds with Corona, very tempting URLs, attacks against middleware, attachments with popular names of popular software like Zoom. Next. I will not get into this, we don't have time, but there are people have cataloged what is happening, and there are all kinds of things, including one word that I did not mention, RAT is a remote administration tool, or some call it a remote access Trojan. And either way, what that does is it installs itself, and then people can access your computer from outside. Next. Can you go back to it? I think I missed a slide. Can you go back one more? Okay, doesn't matter. Forward 1 and 2. Next slide. Next. Yeah, so some information on you can. There are a large number of sources from which you can get genuine information on post-COVID malware, spam, etc. These are good catalogs. There are some training programs. Next slide, please. This is a training program. You can see the MIST project. It's actually open source cybersecurity intelligence. And this is the COVID training that they're offering free of cost, how to be aware of these kind of problems. Next. Okay, now moving on, the issue of Zoom. Next. Zoom has been around since 2011, and I have been personally using it from 2015 because Zoom has been the software of choice for Internet Society. At 2015, Zoom was one among the many options available, and the most prominent option was Adobe Connect, which is written in Flash, and Flash is a obsolete platform and a notoriously insecure platform. So, and that is used by ICANN for most of our meetings. And then later on, ICANN, after realizing the problems with Flash, moved on to Zoom. And last month's Zoom meeting of ICANN had about 1,700 users, which is very large for a Zoom meeting. Now, Zoom has become, after the COVID problem, has become the #1 because of its ease of use, features, and bandwidth efficiency. Because it became suddenly shooting up to #1 position, there's a lot of scrutiny. A lot of people studying Zoom to see the vulnerabilities. And the following issues have been raised against Zoom. Next. Partial or poor end-to-end encryption leading to poor security and leaks of email IDs of the participants. Publicly available records of Zoom meetings on the internet. If you look for a certain pattern of words on the internet, which is what the Zoom recordings look like in terms of the file name, you can identify many Zoom meetings, some of which were supposed to be confidential, but somehow the recording has come online. There are security issues with the Windows client of Zoom that allowed illegal access to data on affected machines. Now, Windows as a platform is not very reassuring, actually. In fact, if you look at the Kali Linux, it's a Linux for penetration testing. There are various contests for penetration testing, and they say if you are targeting Windows, then you cannot participate because it's too easy to penetrate Windows. So Windows, unfortunately, due to actually several interesting reasons, Windows is not as secure or is not considered as secure as some of the other platforms. So in this case, the Zoom client has some issues. Zoom bombing, there was this numerous cases. In fact, one last week from Singapore where there's a classroom, online classroom was going on. Suddenly they had a person coming into this, barging in, completely unknown person, and he started showing some inappropriate images in the middle of this class. So you can imagine what will happen in terms of if schools and colleges are going to use Zoom. Another problem is that some part of the software development of Zoom is done in China, and some of the calls are routed through servers in China. And finally, as an open source person, I would say that Zoom is not open source, and so nobody can study or audit the code, and it's a defect as far as I'm concerned. This has not been, of course, solved. Zoom continues to be a proprietary software. Next. Now, the point is that Zoom's competitors, including WebEx or several others, nobody has done a similar study on them. So we do not know what is this real situation, what is the risk from these competing products. Now, if you think Zoom is unsafe, what do? You switch to another one. But how do you know whether that is safe? So this is an issue. Secondly, Zoom has been aware of the problems, and now some of the other communities like the Internet Society and ICANN, they are hypersensitive about privacy and confidentiality and so on. So these issues have been raised a month back in many of the circles, and Zoom had kind of promised that they are fixing it, and they have come back and said they have fixed most of it. And the last quote, which says users sacrifice far more privacy using services like Facebook, WhatsApp, Gmail, Google Search, and even commercial operating systems than they do using Zoom. This is from a cybersecurity expert. Now, ideally, we would like all our software to be completely safe. Practically, none of the software that we use are safe, as we see from different cybersecurity problems. Now, Zoom is somewhere in the middle, and as far as I can understand from my more competent friends, Zoom is not such a bad thing. It's not the risk, so-called risk, is not so bad. And for most practical purposes, unless you're dealing with the government kind of confidential information, you can continue to use Zoom. Government of India may have its own reasons for not wanting to use Zoom, but for regular kind of use like ours, this is not a big deal. Next slide, please. Yeah, now here the point is, just imagine what will happen after the lockdown is lifted. And suppose you have you're a young family with say 2 children who are school going, say 5 years and 7 years. As a parent, you have to teach your children new things, because they're going to sit in the school bus, they're going to fight with other children, they're going to play, they're going to go to school, and they're going to go to various places in the school. How do you protect your child from COVID? In the home, it's very easy. You put a mask if you want at home. For short distances, you can put a mask and then ask him or her to go out and be safe. But when you let out the student or child for the whole day, you have to teach the child new things about personal hygiene. You have to teach the children that, look, please stay away from. Now, it's very hard, I know, but we are in a kind of context where we have to think of this sort of a thing, that our children have to be sensitized to a new reality. Now, exactly the same way, we have to think of a new reality for us, the end users. We are not, all of us are not cybersecurity experts, but we have to see how we can survive. And this is not just for today's lockdown. It is for the long haul. It is going to continue. The cybersecurity is going to become more of a concern. Next slide, please. So we need a new set of cyber hygiene practices for now as well as for later. What are these? Some examples. These are not exhaustive. We have to. Somebody has to work on this. Maybe Internet Society can do that to bring out a comprehensive list. Think before you click on emails. When you click on an email and click on an attachment, be very, very, very careful. Patch your operating system. Ensure it is up to date. Consider using safer operating systems. If you don't care what operating system you use, then maybe there is some sense in using a safer operating system than the default. Use strong passwords for software and hardware. Now, your routers, all your IoT devices, ensure that passwords are strong. Keep backups of your data. Now, if your computer is destroyed, not a problem really, but if your data is gone, it is far more costly for you, because you can't recreate the data. The computer is just a bunch of hardware parts. So the data is more important, and you have to ensure that so suppose the ransomware comes and attacks your computer. So there are cases where that you may even pay the money, but you don't get your data back. Be aware of social engineering and take precautions. There are various ways to cheat you into revealing your passwords. Do not click on embedded links in SMS. Next. Never implicitly trust any information online. or I would say very plainly, do not trust anything that comes to you online. If you want to trust, you check it multiple times through multiple independent parallel processes or sources. Even the emails that says it's from a friend or social media posts, there's so much of fake news, and it's a whole ocean out there. So be very careful. Social media in general, you should be very careful. Be exceedingly cautious about financial information or identity related information, because once you let your identity be stolen, it can be a big cascading slippery slope. Never share OTPs. If you do not know about this, take the assistance of experts. Activate two-factor authentication where possible. Do you get an offer that sounds too good to be true? If so, it is definitely a scam. And not just you, but teach your family, teach your friends, especially if they use your computer or you're using their computer. Be very careful that you practice. I mean, this whole hygiene practices, this new cyber hygiene practices, that they are sensitized. Next. So my last slide. Next. So no, please go back. Yeah. The cybersecurity landscape is infested with numerous malicious entities who have their own objectives, and end users have been largely unaware of this risk, but occasionally they've been losing money, the reputation, or identity. The COVID-19 outbreak has accentuated the problem, given the very rapid rise in the number of attacks, and using COVID-19 related theme to lure end users, and the fact that using COVID-19 to confuse users, to make them more anxious, to make them more desperate for information, and use the desperation to penetrate into their computers. Now, this is also a social problem, and it is up to us, people like us who are in the call today, to be aware of this problem and to spread awareness among others, particularly the more vulnerable groups, including children, aged, and new users of these technologies. So thank you for a patient listening, and I am now open for questions or comments.
Thank you, Satish. There are some 8 questions.
Yes, please.
First question is from Ajay DM. Sometimes back, there was a news that all servers manufactured in China were embedded with a chip, which will allow access when requested from a particular IP. It was said that Amazon, Microsoft are under this threat, but no one were able to do anything on that. Your comments.
Right. So now there are multiple aspects to this. There was indeed a case of something like this was raised. Usually, if you look at the mainstream chips that are powering our computers, these are based on designs from well-known companies in the West, whether it's Intel or ARM or AMD. So it is not easy to change those designs during the manufacturing process, and there would be kind of testing happening, etc. But there are actually other chips which are not the CPUs themselves, which may be locally sourced, which the designs may be done locally in different countries. Now, it is not as if it's only China that is at fault. There are various countries which are at fault, including many countries which ask for backdoors. Effectively, the same. Some of the mobile phones, for instance, there have been cases saying that some countries have refused their armed forces people from using some manufacturers' mobile phones. So these are basically precautions. I'm really unable to say for sure that these are proved, but these are suspicions, and sometimes you cannot effectively prove this. Like I said, about the 10,000 doors, there are so many attack surfaces that it is very hard to exhaustively test. So as a precautionary approach, people have been banning some of these manufacturers' chips as well as devices. So I would say it's a prudent kind of safety precaution. I would not claim that it has been proved beyond doubt that these are real threats, but it's actually safer to be prudent about it.
Second question from Amrita Chaudhary. What are the alternatives to Zoom?
Right, thanks Amrita for the question. There is a bunch of alternatives to Zoom. I can share the the data with you offline. In fact, Diplo has actually come out with a very nice comparison, table of comparison between about, I think, 11 different products. But in actual practice, as an open source person, there are two that I should mention. Jitsi is one. Jitsi is good for small groups. If the number of people is more than 30, Jitsi is unstable, unfortunately. The other is Big Blue Button, which is also not as, in fact, none of the other competitors are as good as Zoom when it comes to the combination of factors we're talking about. For instance, the ease of use, the bandwidth efficiency, the features, etc. So Zoom is not perfect. Nobody's saying it's perfect, but among these groups, and in fact, I'm waiting for Google or Microsoft to come out one day with a big bang with their new product to challenge Zoom, and that is very likely to happen. But until then, the Zoom offers this, kind of a best compromise between all these different factors. But if you really want the list of different options available, I can share it with you.
What about WebEx?
Yeah, WebEx, again, some of us in the call have been using WebEx for quite some time. In fact, IEEE has WebEx free, but we had such a lot of problems. I remember in one of the calls about 2-3 weeks back, half the people were not able to hear the other half. Basically, kind of the users are partitioned into two groups. So within the groups they can hear, but across the groups they cannot hear. So that's a very difficult situation, and that did happen with WebEx. So it's also a little more heavyweight. Like Zoom is very lightweight. It works on Linux that I'm using right now, or my Android phone. It works everywhere pretty well. GoToMeetings is another good option. It also works on.
But what is the privacy concern? Whether it hides, it takes your data, credit, debit card, and all those kind of things?
Dr. Govind, thanks for the question, but no, not really. It doesn't take your credit card or debit card. All it does is, at worst, it shares your the email IDs of your participants in your meeting. That list may go out to unauthorized people, so they may spam you, etc.
Not to fear from the theft of the debit card and all those kind of things.
No, debit card, credit card does not enter the picture because it is with Zoom. Even when you take a paid account on Zoom, that is directly between your machine and Zoom's headquarters. That is not the problem. The problem is when you schedule a meeting, you add some 30 or 100 participants to that list, or you send it out to many people and they all log in. It is possible that the login, the email IDs of some of these can be leaked. That's all. It is not a financial threat.
There is no issue in that. Okay, thank you.
Satish, we have some two international IEEE bigwigs, Celia Shahnas and Sheikh Fatah. Welcome. Sheikh Fatah has a question too. COVID-19 causes two major behavioral changes in personal and government level, that increasing the use of online resources and threats, lack of FTO meeting, outdoor games, FTO office works, increasing online use of banking sector, government relief works, people marketing. What kind of prevention is accepted from top level management?
Thanks, Sheikh, and thanks, Sheikh and Celia, for joining us. Of course, these are very good friends of us, not just for me personally, but also many others and Kerala section itself. Celia was there in the last IEEE meeting that we had. Yeah, so increasing number of face-to-face transactions. In fact, for many countries, like even in India, they were trying to promote online kind of use of things, digital payments, everything going online, because many of these things are not so scalable as online is. Now, prima facie, I think when you talk about going online, people who have been using these online tools for some time, they are now increasingly clear about the security risks. But people who are new to this whole thing, they are either first generation users of these technologies, or they are in an age group that either they're very young or they're very old, and they are not agile enough in their minds to kind of understand the full reasons for. So you have no know-how, which basically says how to use something. We also have no why, which is why you do certain things the way you do, and it is important to have both. And the young people, they have both of these. So that information gap is something that is a problem. And it is up to us to, that's what again I'm repeating myself, but it's up to us to protect those around us. Now, this could be done organizationally, like through IEEE or through Internet Society or through the Institute of Engineers or such professional institutions. And I believe that we have a obligation to society to get them to sensitize them about this. I don't see there's any alternative to going online. Everything is going to increasingly go online, whether it is face-to-face meetings. In fact, many of the big meetings that we used to have, like ICANN, it will not happen, or even IEEE. It's not likely to happen. We will be forced to go online. There is no going back. And in many ways, it is much better also. You don't have to fly all these miles. You don't have to pollute the whole atmosphere. It is much more environmentally friendly. We don't consume so much of power. So there are many good things also about going online. But I do not see an option or an alternative. So we have to basically, help others who are. Now, this is a transitional problem. It will vanish in one generation. The next generation will not have any problems, and subsequent generations would have no issues at all. So it's a very temporary transitional problems of our generation, I think.
There's another question from Celia Shahnas. How an intelligence can be added to detect and differentiate between good message and malicious message, so the users do not face reputation problem due to blocking of their phone numbers by their mobile company.
Right. So artificial intelligence or machine learning is being applied in cybersecurity. It is not very easy. There are some email messages that you take a look at it, you instinctively can make out this is a fraud or this is a scam. But some of these messages are also very clever, like spear phishing messages. There have been so many cases of spear phishing, which is actually extraordinarily successful. 80% of spear phishing attempts succeed actually. And this could be your accountant will get a message from his boss saying transfer so much of money to this account. And that mail will look exactly like the usual mail from his boss. In fact, in my company, we had one such mail. Unfortunately, the accountant had there's a manual system in parallel. So the accountant did not transfer the money just based on the email. But there have been so many cases where, in fact, that is one of the issues of working remotely because there's no human touch. In our case, the accountant went physically to the CEO, but that is not going to happen in future because people are in different places. So we have to then build in multiple ways of handling this. But coming to the issue of machine learning, we are at taking baby steps to use machine language to filter out spam. And Google itself is doing it. Google spam filters are exactly doing this. For public use, for our own office use, we don't have a tool yet, but I think we are heading towards that direction.
There are some questions regarding Microsoft Teams, Jitsi, GoToMeeting, Google Meet. How are they comparable to Zoom?
Well, the issue is that this is very subjective, and it's very hard to, it's like asking which, brand of car you like. Is it Honda City or Honda, or it's very hard to say because it will depend on your choices. But for me, it is Zoom, which is the current optimum. This will change tomorrow when there is a new product with better features and better security. But currently, Zoom to me appeals best. But also, I'm a fringe user because I use Linux. I don't use Windows. So it has to work on Linux, which is an added constraint. So I may not be the most general case out there, but to me, Zoom is still the most optimal.
There is one question from Gomadi. Is it safe using smartphones without antivirus for online financial transactions?
Can you please repeat the question?
Is it safe using smartphones without antivirus for online financial transactions?
In general, yes. We do not have much of antivirus for Android yet. It is not to say that Android is safe, but for various reasons, and the fact that there is this, side channel, meaning the transactions are not done without a completely different channel, which is the OTP or the SMS. So currently, because of that's why in India every transaction needs an OTP, and you can't bypass it. That's an added precaution. because if everything is done on an Android, there could be a problem. So there is this out-of-band way to get some password or something. Another factor, I mean, like two-factor authentication. So by and large, it is still safe, I would say, on Android or iPhone devices. If you are a general purpose user. If you are Jeff Bezos, then you can get hacked. But the cost of hacking is very high in that case, because there are some very specialized tools that can hack into any of these devices. But if you're an ordinary person, that is not the case, and you are not in their radar. So I would say that as of now, it is reasonably safe to say that we can use Android for financial transactions.
From Dr. K.G. Satish Kumar, can threat actor be a bit that can be traced to a human or organization? Can threat actor be a bit that can't be traced to a human or organization?
I think it's a bot. If it's a bot that is meant, a bot is a botnets, and it's basically a program. Threat actors can be bots because bots have been used to attack computers like DDoS and DOS, that is distributed denial of service. So bots have been used, but then bots and botnets have CNC, control and command center, and from that control and command center, we can track down the human or the organization that is actually driving these bots. It has been done, not so easy, but it has been done. So although the bot itself is a program, the bot is acting under the command or control of someone else, and that someone can eventually be caught. So like I said, it can be hard, but it has been done in the past. It does make it harder to find out the individual. But even today, for many of these so-called high-profile attacks, we have no conclusive evidence of who's behind it. We have approximate ideas. We roughly, between individuals, we say, okay, we are very clear. But officially, in the media, nobody's saying that it is Russia or it is Israel or it is the US which has done it. So,
another question from Ihida Gangavarapu. Before COVID, most updates of systems used by the employees happen within the organization's network. How are they happening now that the systems have shifted to the residence of the employees, and what are the challenges?
Yeah, so thanks for the question, Ihida. So the point is that the home machines were generally considered as second-class machines. We don't care what is there in that, and anyway, it's being used by children for playing games. But suddenly they have become important because we have to work from them, and they have become our workstation. So during that change, I'm not saying all organizations do that. Many companies, in my company, for example, most employees preferred to take their machines out. There were special government permissions for that because these are all government. It's a bonded warehouse of the government. So there were special permissions, and people finally took out their machines and took it to their homes. But many other companies have said that people should work on their home machines. So the issue is that home machines were not, nobody had taken care to patch these up. So now what's happening is, one of the problems again is that, like in Windows, you have to wait for a long time to download the patch, to apply it. The machine cannot be used during that time. It's a big pain. Now, no matter what this is, for at least one time, you have to update all the patches. And from then, it's only incremental. So the time taken is not so much. So we have to bite the bullet. We have to ensure that we patch ourselves. And that is the only way we can go forward. Otherwise, we could be the vector to get this malware into our whole organization.
Another question from Cynthia. I have heard an experience from a friend that he received a ransom mail from which mentioned password associated with the Gmail account 8 years back. Would it be that the account has been hacked? What action can be taken on it?
Well, this is a fairly common problem. And the most recent incarnation of it in the last 3-4 years has been that we have observed you going to some porn sites, etc., and we have recorded all the action, and we will reveal this to your friends and family if you don't pay us money. And here's the password also. That is just to kind of. Now the point is, many passwords have been leaked on completely unrelated issues. Those passwords are all online, and many of us have the habit of reusing passwords. And thirdly, sometimes the old passwords we have kind of abandoned, and those passwords are out. There are many sites where we can check if our password is compromised. And for me, almost all my passwords have been compromised, almost all. So it's very hard to keep on changing your password because you have some 20, 30 accounts for different purposes. If you use the same password, then you are at great risk. Now, if you have different passwords, then you have to keep track of them. So it's a big problem. But generally speaking, the password leaks are likely to be historical, meaning they're old, not the current, it's not the latest thing. And Gmail is very, very hard to crack unless, you voluntarily, that is through social engineering, you reveal your password. It is not easy to crack at all. There are no documented cases of Gmail getting hacked just by using the techniques available today, which is like brute force or whatever. So Gmail is, I think, still safe. So is any other mainstream like Yahoo or whichever other mail you're using. If you want extra precaution, you go for Proton Mail. Now, what Proton Mail, which is in India, it's a paid service. Proton Mail offers a feature that even they don't read your mail, unlike Google, which is using your mail to give you advertisements, which is targeted based on your content. So, but in general, I would say Gmail is not been hacked, so you don't have to worry about it.
There is another question. Are you following this one? I missed. Are you following the Maze ransomware?
Just very recent. I saw it yesterday or day before. I've been, because I was prepared for this seminar, I have not studied it in detail. So I have no comments on it right now.
Sheikh Fateh has an offer for you. Really, the webinar was very effective, very informative. I'm honored to know more about the area. I would like to invite Kerala section volunteers to join a joint panel regarding social issues and technological solutions during the COVID-19 pandemic. We have similar socio-economic structure and values. We can host and invite you on IEEE Site Day.
Thanks, Sheikh. Sheikh and I were on HAC, and now I am on Sheikh's committee on education. So Sheikh, of course, is a very well-known person to us. And I'm sure we have experts from Kerala section who can join the panel. So please send us the invitation and we will ensure that some of us join.
So that's all, Satish. Thank you for the presentation and the question and answer, very interactive session. Let me invite Dr. Krishna Kumar, Chairman of the PMI, President of the PMI, to give you the vote of thanks.
And, thank you, Harindralal, for the invite, and good afternoon to all. I'm Krishna Kumar, President of PMI Kerala Chapter. As Harindralal said, this is a great initiative put forward during the crisis time. We have a saying in Malayalam, Urvashi Shapa Upagara. All the societies, main societies in Kerala joined together to provide a common platform for their members to update their knowledge from the various experts from all parts of the world. And today's session was too insightful about the cybersecurity, and during this panic time, it is very important. And I would like to place in record our grateful appreciation and big thanks to our eminent speaker, Satish Babu, who is the chair, APRALO, ICANN, from all the societies for delivering such a wonderful session today. Thank you very much. The second in the row, Harindralal, who took this initiative to speak to all the societies and envisioning such a common program. Today, he gives a welcome address as well as became the moderator. I would like to place on record the appreciation and the thanking from all the societies to Harindralal for this wonderful coordination. We would like to thank Shabrinath for the wonderful speaker introduction as well. And I would like to thank all the office bearers and the participants of all these organizations who are being the part of this great initiative. Intersociety India Trivandrum Chapter, IEEE Kerala Section, IEEE Kerala State Center, CSI Trivandrum Chapter, and PMI Kerala Chapter. who are the part of this great session and contributing with a lot of participation and a great interaction. We have international panelists or the delegates as well today, and that's a great privilege. We will continue doing this session in the coming weeks as well, and requesting your continued support and participation in making this program a great successful. Thank you, and thank you all for the great support.
So our next program is on tips for facing physical and mental health issues in overuse of digital gadgets by Professor Achyut Shankaresh Nair, Head of Department of Computational Biology and Bioinformatics, next Wednesday, 6 to 7. Welcome you all. Once again, we will be sending the invite. You please respond to that. So I think there is a limitation of the participants.